So good evening, everyone. It's a round table, U-shaped. We can't see the faces, but we'll try to figure out how we do this. So I think a round of introductions would be good. I honestly don't know enough about each one of you, so it's best that you introduce yourself and your connection to the industry and kind of the intersection of technology as well. But before we get to that, let me just kind of outline why this topic is important. So apart from the introduction done, actually, I work with ICTA, in the board of ICTA, and kind of driving the policy on the digitalization of the government, the whole digitalization program. So within that, actually, one objective is around supporting the strategic industries, because from a country perspective, we know where we are in terms of our export revenues and the issues that we had around not having enough dollars. So if we are to not repeat that, we need to expand that export economy. So I think government wants that to expand it within like certain selected industries to about 35 billion, overall 45. But 5 strategic industries bringing 35 billion by 2030. I mean, that's the intention, and plans are drawn around that. So the industries are like tourism, manufacturing, IT as well, marine-related, and agriculture, right? So that's why all of you are here. It's exports. It needs to be talked about. One thing that we have got feedback from all the venture capitalists who have come here is that we are really bad at marketing Sri Lanka. So that's why Sanjini is here. So with that, I think, Hishan, would you like to start the introductions?
Okay, thank you, Chandima. So, quick introduction. I'm Hishan Singhawansa. I'm the CEO of Cinnamon Hotels. I've been with Cinnamon Hotels for the last 8 years, but Cinnamon Hotels is part of the John Keel's group, which I've been part of for more than 15 years. So I'm very, very excited to be here. I think I'll come to the opportunity we have with tourism and travel in the industry, but a little bit about me. Although I'm in hospitality, I'm originally an engineer by education, so that's a little different to all the other hospitality people, but I'm really excited about the growth of tourism in the country and what we can do with that. So I'm happy to be here.
Great to have you. Harsha?
Yeah, so I'm Harsha. I just moved back from the US in February, just shifted back. Fun fact, Hishan and I were in the same batch at Royal, so now sitting in the same panel as well. So before I moved back, I was working at Apple in Silicon Valley for 7 years. Prior to that, I was at Cisco Systems. So my field was hardware product development. I also did engineering. I did electrical engineering in the US. So right now I'm heading the engineering division at GPV.
Oshada.
So I'm Oshada. So I'm from Brandix, and I basically oversee digital from the director board at Brandix. Most of you all would have heard about Brandix. It's one of the larger apparel exporters, which we are based in Sri Lanka, but has a major footprint in India as well as in Bangladesh. Not the ideal right now with the tariffs coming into India, but then it is what it is. We have a major focus on digital transformation as well. My past life included also being at the ICT board as well as a chairman, as well as a CEO, and also lead in the Sri Lanka telecommunication regulator. A few things I could do was basically bring in the OTT services to Sri Lanka, like Netflix and Spotify, as well as initiating the Starlink initiative, which is making inroads right now. That's a bit about me, but looking forward to this discussion. Over to you, Sanjini.
So I'm Sanjini. I'm the only lady on this panel. Yeah. So I started my career in advertising, traditional advertising, at the age of 19. And then I got a bit jittery after about 14 years, and I crossed over to software development and started supposedly to do Marcoms. But gift of the gab, they put me into business development, and I used to run around the world selling something I had absolutely no knowledge of, platforms and services for telco. So all these SMSCs, all these roaming products, all these video suites, all of that, I did that for a while. Then I got a bit tired, and I went back and started working inside Dialog. I don't know, I got pushed into product marketing, and that's when this whole journey of digital, looking at branding, all of that kind of seeped in. So from there, I moved into MAS, which is a rival of Brandix for a bit. Was not at all impressed with going into that industry because it was a back-end role and I just missed all the technology buzz. So then I came back and I wanted a job really badly back in telco, but didn't want to go back into dialogue. So here I am at ADA. It's Asiata Digital and Analytics. I've grown from setting up the agency vertical to actually taking over country operations to now running gigs in, I handle Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, as well as we do WhatsApp as a business platform. So for that, I'm also doing some support services inside India. In addition to that, that's my day job. I volunteer a lot, so I'm on the board at Slascom, driving finance, branding, and membership. And I do, on and off, do some work with ICTA, because there's an AI work stream, and for awareness and adoption, I'm driving that. Yep, so that's a little bit about me.
Great, good to have you. Dr. Anojan.
All right, thank you. So I think there are quite a big names. I prefer introducing myself as a farmer, though I was introduced as the CEO and the director of Polygon Agro. The reason being that many people try speaking about agriculture from a tech perspective, but in a brick and mortar operation, it's my own leased lands. We have about 11,650 acres. We do cultivation of our own. So this has been done for almost close to about 20 years right now. And so in about 2019, I thought, why not we kind of democratize and share some of these practices, what we do in our farms, with other fellow farmers, and try bringing them as agripreneurs or agri-entrepreneurs. So the journey started around that period. And to date, to cut a long story short, there are about 2.2 million users using the platform across the globe, particularly in Bangladesh, Vietnam, Cambodia, in EU, particularly based on Netherlands. So these are the products which we provide to the farmers for them to use. So we cover roughly close to over a billion acres right now by using the satellite technology. When I mean satellites, particularly about the NIR frequency range, as well as the radar sats, as well as on computer vision to understand the soil nutrients to the water levels, etc. So in addition to this, I also volunteer some of my time to support budding entrepreneurs. Also, I'm the secretary for the Sri Lanka Agripreneurs Forum, the largest agribusiness association in the country, which has about 18,500 members. So more than these roundtable discussions, which I appreciate, but my heart is actually towards the ground level farmers, so that the impact is more in terms of rather than someone who is listening and reaching out. In our CSR perspective, we have close to about 50,000 beneficiaries in Sri Lanka, and this is in the journey of making a farmer or a typical Govia to a agri-entrepreneur or an agripreneur. That's about it.
Great, good to have you. So, Oshada, if we kind of dive into kind of manufacturing and especially the apparel industry, I mean, that's an industry that Sri Lanka really relies on for dollars to come. I know like the tariff structures in US is challenging, UK looks like it's more supportive. How are you looking at these changes? What challenges are coming, and how's like technology helping, and how do you actually approach the entire topic of technology at Brandix and in apparel in general?
Yeah, so I think, Chandima, the punches have been coming for quite a while in terms of the apparel industry. From the get-go of the pandemic, then we had the economic downturn in Sri Lanka. And then, of course, right now it's the tariffs. But I think every challenge has an opportunity in itself as well. I wouldn't kid about the fact that it's really a downward trend and historically one of the worst places to be as the industry right now. But I think the opportunity right now we have is to basically invert ourselves on the way we've been doing business as well. for too long, I think we've been focusing on cost arbitrage. We've been trying to basically be the cheapest. So in fact, even our value proposition was being the fastest and the cheapest. Now the fastest is quite important still, but the fact that you have to be the cheapest, it is changing in. So it's a good time to basically look at with a, as I call, a zero-based view in terms of all of the processes, the way we work. The business model itself is ever evolving. I'll give an example of how Shein has come in through. Anybody heard of Shein?
Yeah.
It's quite huge right now across the world. It has more software engineers than apparel experts or fashion experts. From 2016 being a $500 million organization, today it's literally, it's unstated, it's privately owned, majority perspective is that, but it's about 45 billion today, right? And from 2021, I might be a tad off on these numbers, but from 2021 to 2024, it's made its way from 15 billion to 30 billion, and from there on 30 billion to 45 billion. And that's exponential growth. And what they've done is they've completely disrupted the way you look at fashion in terms of bringing in thousands of different SKUs. Where, for example, when you work with the larger fashion brands, we might work with about, X amount of designs that could be, say, 100 or 200 across a month. They're talking about 1,000 new designs coming out per day, right? And they are really inverting from going into the market direct, right? The go-to-market strategy is pretty much going right to the consumer. Of course, one may argue the fact that they're using the de minimis in US and all of that to get there, but, well, it is what it is, right? I mean, it's legit.
They have a working model. Yeah.
They have a working model. So, I mean, the future is going to be this. It's what we need to grapple with. So what we are looking right now is from across the value chain, how do you bring in digitalization? It's not just using software as just implementations, but how do you basically look at not just being just a apparel manufacturer as a provider for our customers, how do we but add value to them in terms of really inflecting their journey. Now, if you look at the Generation Z, the buying patterns have totally changed. What it means is now circularity is coming in the US is very different, right? I mean, the best-selling sites are right now, garments and fashion that you can go and buy as used clothing. I mean, that was never a point from a millennial perspective. So for us, it's been looking at from the overall starting point, the genesis point, which is a tech pack or a design requirement coming from a customer. How do you use AI? I know AI is a bit of a fad right now. Everyone talks about AI, but how do you really infuse it into the value chain is a must that you need to look at. So we've been taking baby steps on this from across the last 3.5 years. One aspect, the first point we went was when ChatGPT hit the ground, although it's been there from 2018 to 2019, we looked at Copilot with Microsoft. I'm not selling Microsoft here, by the way, or advocating for it. But when Copilot came in, we managed to get to the early access program globally as one of the first in Sri Lanka, as well as one of only 6 in Asia. Did it work out? Absolutely not, right? First year, it really didn't work out as well as they told it to be. That's the fact. But the good thing is we got into conversations, Chandima, with that technology way before than anybody else did.
Sure.
The outcomes was we managed to basically get into discussion with the dev teams from Redington itself, right? And right now it's working quite well. We are bringing in new technology in terms of basically creating agility. When we say agility, it's about how do you not just look at a tech pack business, but how do you create your own inspirations that our customers, fashion brands can even adopt, not wait for their designs to come in. So these are things that we are looking at with AI, and the first steps are making positive trends. I'm not going to say we are right up there yet. It's a journey. But the reality is that you need to look at it from end to end, and even our manufacturing, I'll be very honest, right? We've had the luxury of larger margins back in the day. Today it's not. Margin squeeze is real. And it's the same for the fashion brands, right? I mean, the markets are retracting. The buying patterns, as I said, is changing. So we needed to look at how do we basically squeeze and optimize even our manufacturing, and that's where we are looking at our manufacturing front as well to make sure that do we have data-driven insights to make sure that the efficiency goes up. In Sri Lanka, in the apparel industry, the average efficiency is about 55 to 60%.
Right.
The stark reality is what that means is 40% of actual capacity in a factory is burnt out due to downtime, defects, right, and performance. So imagine if we can increase it with technology coming in. that's as much as putting up new plants. You don't have to put up new plants if you increase your efficiency. To do that, you need to make data-driven insights, and that's what we are doing. So IoT is very real right now for us. We've started with one plant, and the outcomes are phenomenal. So one particular plant from just about to get closed has gone up to over 90% of efficiency. Of course, we've had some tailwind, to be very honest.
Sure.
Long runs of manufacturing is very important, because if you have short runs and all that, the learning curve comes into effect. Yeah. So I won't lie to the fact that look, there has been some tailwind, but the good news is if that recipe can be, I would say, perfected, it's a matter of applying it for all the other manufacturing entities. Right. So tariffs is just one, black swan event, as I call it, but then again, we had to invert, and we had to invert fast, and it's happening across the value chain right now. And I would say it's an exciting time, because you literally cannot transform organization unless you have yourself up against a wall, which is happening right now, Chandima. So that's a bit of a gist of how things are going. So it's all the investments we are making today is completely on digital. We are not investing a single dollar on new infrastructure in terms of brick and mortar, and it's all going into digital, and the dividends are coming out as we speak.
All right, good. We'll dive deeper into that. So Hishan, I think tourism is at a really, interesting phase. I used to be at Hemas and looked at P&Ls of the hotels, and by default, we kind of forecast a loss during the off-season. But I think if you go to Hirikatia, even last week, they're still full of foreigners. I think that's something that we have never seen. So that's definitely a positive sign. So how do you look at that, and how do you see kind of technology coming into the space as well?
Yeah, so I'll start off by kind of talking through the opportunity. I feel like Sri Lanka, we operate in Sri Lanka and Maldives both. I'll focus on Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka as a destination is still a very small tourism destination, 2.5 million tourists. In global scale, it's very tiny. A tiny place like Bali gets 8-9 million, 1/10 the size of the island. So we're nowhere close to over-tourism. So I want to can state that. I feel we are a big island. We have multiple things to offer. Yeah. And how do you position Sri Lanka beyond the beaches is key for us to kind of get the best out of Sri Lanka as a tourism destination. So that's why we have this peak. Our peak season from December to March was built around the European traveler who comes for the beaches during the winter period. And over the years, this has changed. If you look at our regional peers in terms of tourist destinations, they have pivoted away from Europe. Right. If you look at Vietnam, Myanmar, all these destinations have a lot of short-haul markets, China, India. And I think we are at this very good place as a destination. We are next door to the largest, fastest growing economy in the world. 1 billion people right next door who will travel. Yeah. There is 30 million outbound travelers now. It's peaked to go 3x over the next 5-6 years. Yeah. So if we get 2-3 million of that, I feel we are at the real cusp of real growth. Right. But that will also make our destination year-round. And we need to really position our destination as a year-round holiday destination. We have much more than beaches to offer. As all of us Sri Lankans know, we have a lot of things to offer. And we shouldn't also compare us with Maldives, because we know Maldives. Yeah. Maldives is a very unique destination. It has only beaches to offer. So we had to really focus on positioning Sri Lanka as that year-round, much more diverse destination. So opportunity number one, we are at the right place, right time. It will come, and we need to really tap into it. One of the keys to this success, I feel, is the brand, country branding, country marketing, getting it out. How we position Sri Lanka as a country brand. We've had 5 bad years. Even before COVID, we had Easter Sunday, which impacted us. So all this has really created a country brand which is not aligned to tourism. So we have to spend money, focus on that. And from a consumer point of view, we've seen the change happening. Right. 10, 20 years ago, people booked their holidays 6 months in advance. Now, post-COVID, people don't trust length of,
yeah.
I mean, all of us, we will wait for the weekend to come to plan our weekend holiday in Sri Lanka. But even foreigners, we've seen people book last minute. Lead times are getting shorter, information is more in real time. They have real-time offers and deals happening. So we have to be very agile and dynamic in terms of how we get to our customers. So the booking behaviors have changed a lot.
Right.
So technology plays a big role in kind of navigating that and addressing that requirement. Finally, from a consumer point of view, another fact is it's a very hyper-personalization is coming up because the technology allows you to do it. You know when you come to our hotels, your past behaviors, what you spend on, what you like, what you don't like. So your experience had to be personalized to that. If you do deliver a cookie cutter solution, you're not going to get above your comp in terms of what you deliver. So that's the focus. I think technology will play a big role in terms of enabling hospitality and hoteliers to really deliver that personal solution. So that's in terms of delivering that solution, not a cookie cutter mass destination.
Sure.
So that's my kind of thought process around what we have in front of us.
Okay, we'll really. Harsha, so I think you have got experience from outside of Sri Lanka in kind of the whole manufacturing process and that business of delivering great consumer products, and now you are in the other side. I mean, how do you see the two experiences, and what do you see as the opportunity for Sri Lanka to be a player within that kind of ecosystem?
Thanks. Yeah, I think before I moved here, one of the things that I was even chatting with Hemind also was to see if there's an opportunity for us to bring some of the bigger companies in the US to do the manufacturing in Sri Lanka. So obviously Apple, if you can get Apple, Google, Amazon, they all have hardware divisions within those companies. So if you can bring them in here, it will create a huge impact on the economy. So kind of way to approach this would be, I'll give you a bit of one story, like how usually companies plan these sites. So, for example, Apple started planning where we're going to build a year and a half before Trump came to power, because we were anticipating that he's going to come in and he's going to impose tariffs on China.
Right.
So that would mean all of the product development teams are going to look into where we can actually position our products to mitigate the tariffs coming from China. So what we did was that we planned all of the units that are coming to the US will build somewhere else, and everything else for the rest of the world can still be coming out of China. But it is so strategic, because the laws are in place such that wherever the CPU is getting assembled onto the motherboard, that's where the country of origin is going to be dictated. So our strategies changed based on that. So we basically made sure the motherboard is built somewhere else other than China, and then bring it to China to do the final assembly, and then call it country of origin to be other than China. So not only Apple, pretty much all of the Silicon Valley companies were doing this. So Vietnam was a huge hub. So we were able to bring that place up very quickly. And basically, pretty much all of the MacBook Pros and all the laptops are coming out of Vietnam right now. And on the iPhone side, as you guys know, India has become a manufacturing site right now. So I think for Sri Lanka, for us to tap into that, I think we need to first understand the geopolitical trends that are happening. And then based on that, kind of best way to bring a large scale manufacturing is to not necessarily to go and talk to Apple or Google or any of those companies, actually go and talk to Foxconn or Contour, some of the bigger manufacturing sites in the world. So Foxconn basically went around and they built up plants for us in Malaysia, Vietnam. So these are all done to mitigate the tariff situation for electronics. Obviously, it didn't work out the way that we anticipated. Trump went and did tariffs on all the countries, but he's not a predictable person. So, but the companies were kind of planning to mitigate that by shifting the sites. So I think in order for Sri Lanka to get this scale of manufacturing, first I think there has to be a policy framework from the government to go and approach these bigger manufacturing sites. Obviously, you need a huge land, and there has to be a massive investment, which can be done. And the other thing is that we have to market ourselves, like similar to kind of what Hishan was saying from an electronic standpoint. Sri Lanka is strategically positioned in shipping lanes, right? So most of the companies right now, they are trying to reduce the cost of like finished goods being shipped through air freight. So pretty much everything is going to go through sea freight. This also helps their carbon neutral initiatives and all that. So we can essentially market ourselves by saying, look, we are in the center of like the shipping lanes. We can just be a strategic hub for these. So those are the kind of things that we can like market the country as. Then in terms of know-how and talent, I think if you approach like large manufacturing sites like Foxconn, they will bring the know-how and the equipment. So I think that can be established here. Obviously, we have the right talent in Sri Lanka. Universities are producing excellent talent. I think the only thing is whether we have the sheer quantity to match the scales. But I think in terms of talent-wise, I've gone to a few career fairs here since I've been here. The talent is really great. So engineering talent is excellent. So I think those are kind of the key factors. I think we have to first market ourselves. But
is that the difference between Sri Lanka and Vietnam? Like, I mean, why would companies look at Vietnam for manufacturing high tech? Because in apparel, I think we are kind of competing.
Yeah. So one of the issues, one of the advantages for Vietnam is that they are still connected to China through ground, right? So the supply chain hub is in China still.
So closest path to
closest
China.
path. So in order to build this up in Sri Lanka, we need to also bring in some of those semiconductor hubs into Sri Lanka. We don't necessarily need to manufacture them, but we need to create hubs to have the supply chain created. That's essentially what Penang, Malaysia did. If you go to Penang and Malaysia, we are building a lot of stuff like Cisco is building, Apple is there, pretty much all of the big players are there, but they also have all these semiconductor hubs all around Penang. So supply chain is kind of there to support that. So Vietnam was picked because of that, and also I think the government was giving huge subsidies. I think Foxconn built up the site for Apple within a year and a half. They were able to build and up and running. So, but I've been to Vietnam and I've been to pretty much Malaysia and all of the other countries that has the sites. In terms of talent, again, like I see a huge difference in like China has really good talent but they have been doing this for a long time. But if you go to Malaysia and Vietnam, I think Sri Lankan talent is better.
Good. So, Dr. Anojan, I think let's drill down to your story. I think we hear a lot of kind of agri-tech, and I think it's important how we sell that story to the actual farmers and all of that. And ultimately, it kind of boils down to whether this tech can really make a difference in terms of ultimately quality of life for the farmers, but in between what kind of outcomes they actually drive on the crops and the quality of crops and the yield and all of that, right? So how does it actually work? I mean, what have you seen in using technology in the kind of the agri space?
All right, thanks. So if you are really looking at the farmer, I think even Sri Lanka has been traditionally an agricultural country. We haven't really seen very high stars on productivity, efficiency, and also we have, as a country, we have not really monetized much from agriculture because the statistics shows that there's about 35 to 40% of the population revolves around agriculture, contributing to about less than 8% of the GDP. And also, as what Oshada was mentioning, again in agriculture, there's about 40% post-harvest losses, which is a huge loss. Almost we are wasting, I think, from the farm gate, which comes out from the productive yield, gets about 40% of that get wasted. So we are so behind in terms of post-harvest management. So I think the solution, it's not just one size fits all. I think agriculture in Sri Lanka has multiple scales, because the reason is that there can be a backyard farmer, there can be a commercial farmer, there are plantations. Even in plantations, there are different sizes and scales, and the management styles are quite different. The terrains are different, so it's not really a factory operation when you really try to slice and dice the agriculture vertical. So, and most often what Sri Lanka or in many other countries try doing is that they try coming out this fancy word called as the value chain, and they try mapping everything possible under that, and they think that it's going to solve the problem. I think there's quite a lot of money which has been unfortunately wasted, which Sri Lanka got as loan from the World Bank, and the agri-modernization project was one of the examples, with all due respect to who has worked on that. But I think the country has not reaped the benefits.
Right.
So the reason is being that the technology infusion and technology adaptation are two different sides. So here, when we really look at the technology adaptation, is the challenge. Technology infusion is much more easier, or you want to kind of build a technology is much easier, but making sure a farmer, a layman who wants to, I mean, when we speak about farmers, I'm predominantly speaking about these 1.65 million typical farmers in the country. I think the adaptation becomes the problem, and more often we have seen the agtech companies in Sri Lanka try selling product, because the larger names, if you really see in the market, I think they are mostly into the agro input side of it. They either deal with the fertilizer importation and reselling, or they import agrochemicals or greenhouse equipments or machineries or fabricating of certain things. But when you really see the hardcore agriculture or growing something, when I mean agriculture, it's not only on plant but also in terms of animal husbandry as well. There are not very many organizations, apart from, you can just count about 2 organizations. They are very particular about on the verticals what they work, but it doesn't really trickle down to the larger community. So here it has always been a poor man's business. So the solution, if we are really trying to look at, as I originally told, I come from an engineering background, telecommunication engineering background. So I got into agriculture just because of passion. And down the line, when we started with about 1 acre, grew to about 650 acres in Sri Lanka, moved into India, then Ghana. And then I thought, like, why not? We have not seen very many Sri Lankans becoming agripreneurs or agri-entrepreneurs or growing their business too. We have seen a lot of people on the latter value chains who do value additions, make a lot of money, but not the people who actually doing the hardcore farming. So drilling down into some of these areas, there are 3 critical problems on this. One is the access to finance, access to market, and the scientific cultivation. What really happens when you really try to speak to the farmer, they say is the access to finance and access to market. But the critical point is the scientific growing or scientific cultivation methods. That's where the technology comes in. But also, having said that, I think how are we going to use, I mean, coming out of understanding the typical farmer, we need to understand they are not going to invest too much until such time they believe and see a productive outcome coming out of it. So there are a lot of products out in the market. If you're looking at particularly Sri Lanka, since the question was asked about the Sri Lankan farmers, it's basically there are solutions like sensors, various IoT devices, etc. But I think again it's a capex investment. Not very farmers can afford that. So I think the moving across to the future of agriculture, or what is already there, which was not there 5 years ago, is that how are we going to harness using the NIR or the near infrared satellite footprints, or how are we going to use on high resolution images using the radar satellites? How are we going to use the computer vision? How are we going to understand the soil nutrients using the spectral technology on the reflective reflections, what we get out of it when we try to spray the satellite footprints and getting the. So these are things which can actually does a lot of, data analytics, and for the farmer giving a simple directions using a machine learning. When it goes through the modules, and the farmer will get only a simple steps what he needs to follow. This is what the changing, the transformation on agriculture. And just to give an example of what we do here, I think some of our competitor products, one of our competitor products is from India, where they provide for a farmer at about $50 a month, is being offered here by, I think with almost about 4 times more facilities has been offered to the farmer for about 800 rupees. So which is about less than about $3 when you compare. And so when you equate it, it's almost about very much lesser than that, because the 4 times the service is about $200 compared to $3. So as I very much agree with Harsha on this, there's a lot of talent here, but I think the government getting involved or the policymakers getting involved, channeling on the right direction, making sure the reach and the adaptation, getting the resources of the government, and there are about close to about 14,800 of the agrarian service officers as well as the agrarian inspectors in the country. But I think getting these resources more mobilized and getting them onto extension services, these are things that Sri Lanka should work and would transform the phase of agriculture.
Sure. Thank you. Sanjini, take us to the world. How do you do it? I think there are lots of advances, right, with AI and on the marketing front. So, yeah, how do we do this? I know we are behind in many areas, but and I know like you got frustrated many times as well trying to do this for the different organizations, but yeah, how do you do it?
So I think the switch for us is we moved from, like you said, cookie cutter to more personalization. And I think we have some really super stories. I've been listening to each of these gentlemen, but how do we really take that out? We don't tell the story, we don't select the correct platform, we just try to say the same thing across everything. So today you are looking at, to your end, somebody starts thinking about traveling, we should be there. How do we do that? We need to make sure that we integrate from the back end, make sure that you have your CRM data, make sure you have your CDPs. It's not just a campaign anymore. There's no point just running an ad campaign and okay, yeah, so Sri Lanka, yeah, wow factor. What happens beyond that? They come here sometimes, I don't think we've collated all of that information. They come back again, it's not consistent. So there has to be, yes, omni-channel in terms of your brand needs to look and feel and everything the same across every single touch point. For a customer, it's about experiences. And that whole intelligence layer has been laid on top of it, yeah, but that only gives us that scale. So how do we really take a message out there? So we are all sitting on data, right? So much of data. And some of this data is in different forms. First and foremost, I think we need to bring all of that together. We need to structure our data so that we know what cohorts of audiences we need to be talking to. We've got different dimensions in Sri Lanka. For example, yeah, agri. How do we tell the farmer story out there? Because there's this whole, I think I learned from being in apparel, this whole concept of ethical, sustainable fashion, all of that. How do I bring that kind of experience to a farmer sitting somewhere in the central province? Because people are now looking at how you source, ethical sourcing. So we can tell those stories, and technology is enabling us to tell those stories. But where are we telling these stories? I always use the example of this guy, Hiran Amarasekar, who talks so much about AI. It's making something complex seem simple. How do we simplify it? We kind of overwork ourselves into a point that we don't look at it from that perspective. We have a platform, I don't know if how many of you know, called Island of Ingenuity. It's our country positioning for technology. But imagine the power of bringing all of these industries together, because I've been struggling with trying to figure out what are we talking about when we talk about ingenuity. It's our people, it's our experiences, it's the feeling that someone gets left with when they come here and they go back. How is it that we are not looking at it where we collaborate with tourism or with the manufacturing space or even agri-space? We need to be thinking across the board, not in siloed fashion. Sure. And I think that's something that technology allows us to do. The second thing is, I think yesterday also there was a whole concept around trust. So one of the things that we can really look at is Sri Lanka as a space where we do something more, there's more accountability, we are into ethical sourcing, even AI, ethical AI, all of these nuances, because they will not come to you if they don't trust you, right? Sure. So how do we build those cues into it? And today, all of these engines allowing you to do all of these analysis before time, you can actually look at how your campaigns are performing. You can actually figure out who's interacting. But your booking engine, is it connected through to your website? Is it connected to your back-end call center? Is it connected to your WhatsApp channel? How do I give that same experience from the time I come into one of your hotels to when I go back and I want to come back again? How do you keep engaging me? I think Temu, I love Temu. I don't know about, I wear Shein shoes, Temu tags. I mean, every day they're popping something to me. They have really changed. It's like a free-for-all buffet for me. I have stopped sometimes looking at my phone because it's just crazy. Why is it that we are not taking that kind of learning and putting it into every single industry, right? Every single industry. Yesterday, that gentleman from Paytm was talking about our unique position in terms of even wellness. We've got all these different things. We just don't know how to market it. Sure. How do we bring it all together and create those unique experiences which are uniquely Sri Lankan across the different industries? I think that's something that we really need to think about and how we do it. So all the technology means nothing, all the AI means nothing if we don't collectively sit together and figure out how we are going to market ourselves out there. Because people are doing it. Tech industry is doing something, apparel industry is doing something else, but we need to sit collectively as one and figure out how do we market Sri Lanka for its unique position. So I think that's something we need to really be thinking about.
Connected with that, I think some of the industries themselves are not united and have a single theme. I know, like apparel, I mean, you may see like competition, but they do a lot of collaborative work. Between Mahesh and Ashraf, I mean, they have a certain level of understanding. They work for the betterment of the industry. So the garments without guilt, and that's something that the whole industry adopted. I think even the tourism, actually, you find it very difficult to do because different players and different segments actually pull in different directions, even for messaging. So I think, I think the industry's responsibility.
We want to bring the apples of the world here. What is it that we offer them? They'll come. I mean, do we have the infrastructure to manage them? That's one thing, right? But how can we bucket that with something that you're offering on tourism side and create that destination that people want to come and sit and explore and experience and be left with? So we should be looking at how we leverage off each industry. I think we're trying to do something from the tech industry, collaborating with tourism. So that's something that we're looking to do in long term, I think, even with our Indian counterparts, offering them the full package so that they come in, they not only experience our cinnamon life or whatever, but they also experience Hiriketia and they experience all our entrepreneurs and our garments and all of that. How do we bring all of that together? So I think that's something we have which most destinations may not have. I did a trip to Bali. I think we were taken to about a year and a half ago for a workshop, and we went to do all those little Bali things. And I was thinking, what a unique proposition we have. Allah is in one aspect, and it has all these different things that we can offer. Hiriketia, yes. Yapane, something else. Why are we not monetizing that? And I think digital can bring all of these things together, right? we can extend all these experiences out there, because that's what it's giving us. It's an opportunity to take all these human connections at scale. So that's something I think we should technically be looking at, and look at it differently.
Sure.
And not do the same old thing we've been doing before.
Okay, thank you. Party is rocking, so. But I think let's open and to any questions that our audience has. Otherwise, like, I have only like one other question to ask. But it's open, I think.
My name is Richard. So basically, I'm a data guy, and I'm very happy to see Sanjini talking about the data engineering principle, bringing everything together and giving importance to data. So I'm being in this industry for like a decade. It's 10 years. I have seen many of the Sri Lankan companies, they are very reluctant to go data-driven. So, for example, when in 2010, I was working for a small company. So at that time, I was very young. And we went and did a POC. I was very small, and we pitched a tool called IBM Cognos. Okay, so at that time, the BI was a buzzword. And they were very reluctant to accept that technology, the tool. So they are very fond about the AS400 and the, what do you call this, dot matrix printed report. And so my question is, I'm not into more Sri Lankan companies now. I work for foreign companies. The scale, I see, the question is how Sri Lankan companies are willing to go data-driven. The big players are, of course, they are into that. But if you take the SMEs, how they are valuing the data. So,
yeah, I think, I mean, SME enablement is a complete, I think, a topic that's worth discussing separately. But I think at least a few industries that have been involved, I think there's definitely an elevation in terms of appreciation of data and the management wanting to go down that path, and disciplines of like, okay, let's make decisions actually based on data rather than based on the guts of the loudest mouth in the meeting room, which is how we made decisions, right? And Oshada, like, what do you feel? We have made progress?
No, yeah, I mean, as you absolutely rightly said, the larger organizations will have some sort of rigor. And ideally, see, in the manufacturing front, I would even go as to the point of saying data is essential, right? I mean, you cannot go without data. I'll give you a simple example. We talked about eroding margins. We talked about much more challenging environment. How much of excess raw materials, and raw materials is about 70% of the cost of our manufacturing, and there's tons and tons of write-offs because you don't have demand sensing. Imagine what you could do with data in terms of predicting much more better on exactly what the requirements are, and you can literally create a margin out of nowhere, for example. So the wastage, that's one aspect, but demand sensing is something that it can go a long way to being from a traditional manufacturer to a growth partner for our customers, for example, because that's unlock that we see. So we as a large organization has been quite mature at that, and we've been working with Databricks, Snowflake, the Power BI platforms and all of that, but what's very intriguing for me is your question of how is SMEs getting along on that, or even the startups. I think that's where there's a lot of data literacy has to come in. And I think the biggest issue right now is the data literacy from a top-down approach. People don't realize the importance of it and how it can really invert the growth of organization in that front. One aspect is I would say the entry barriers in terms of cost of technology, but the reality is it's coming down. But we are all talking about AI. There's not much AI you can infuse unless you have data readiness, right? And a lot of people are talking about Gen AI. Gen AI is the same thing as well. You have to have an API ready, event-driven aspect where you should be able, the agentic AI framework should be able to infuse information and get information out of systems. So I think the first step is basically creating that data awareness and also bringing in that skill to that organization. Now, many SMEs don't have the luxury of getting that skills infused onto the organization itself. So you need to have an ecosystem of vendors that focus on creating that authentic approach of saying, look, you have to, now as you mentioned, a data-driven point for organization is right down the journey of starting with the point of being data ready, being data aware, and then going into the stage. So I think there's a lot of activity that has to happen from the GovTech front, the ICTs and all that, and it's happening, but not at a pace that you should be happy. But I think that's a lot of acceleration we'll have to do with a lot of awareness. I think it's happening in silos, but I think there's a long way to go, to be very honest.
So I think on SME enablement, so Ministry of Industry and Entrepreneurship, together with the Digital Ministry and FITIS, which is part of the IT industry bodies, I think they're trying to get a program together. I mean, if you have some input, I'm happy to connect you into that ecosystem to share your insights and knowledge on that. Any other questions? Yeah, please.
I mean, this question will be for a few of them. So I feel like you were talking about the digitalization, but in Sri Lanka is still, I will say, different industries, including like agriculture or garment or tourism, take advantage of very low salaries of the people, no? Especially after the economic crisis, like the salaries didn't evolution. So, I mean, you can have somebody working in a factory for 30,000 rupees, or like a farmer picking tea for 1,000 rupees a day, or even Cinnamon Life have 1,200 employees. That for me is, I mean, I have a small hotel just with very few employees, and like, how can you pay those salaries?
Right.
How do you feel like once like the economy supposedly develop and then the salaries develop, then they will create much more pressure in all these industries? Don't you think that it will be the catalyst for you to become more efficient and to implement more digital? Because then you will see like like now you see it like it's cheaper just to hire somebody than to use some technology. Do you think once the salaries become higher and then you see the employees, they're so expensive, you will implement much faster those technologies, not only the big companies, but also the small and medium companies?
Yeah, so I think I'm sure Oshada has his view. I mean, based on my experience at like MAS, so in manufacturing, we are not the cheapest. So I think for the last 10 years, I don't think we were the cheapest. So certain industries are very mature. Like the apparel industry in Sri Lanka is very mature in terms of driving efficiency. And you would, if you go to Bangladesh, if you go to India, most parts you will actually see Sri Lankan factory managers managing, because Sri Lanka has actually developed a science around driving efficiency. Because in apparel, what you actually sell is the minutes. And the factory manager's target is cost per minute. And every year the cost per minute has to go down for any of these factories to exist and stay competitive. Because there's always another destination that emerges that's cheaper than us. Oshada.
No, interesting question. I just want to understand whether I got this right. So what you're saying is, if we ensure that we skill up the workforce to be more attuned to a higher salary, that it could contribute to digitalization. Did I get the question right?
Yeah, I mean, like maybe like at some point, like the jobs they become a bit more specialized, the salaries come up, so then you cannot afford to have so many employees. So then you need to force yourself to use more technology and to use more driven data rather than human workforce.
No, right now we are competitive because of the lower salaries. When it comes up, what happens?
Yeah, so that's a very good point. In fact, it's actually happening as well. So to your point, if I take the manufacturing example again, we have a different view on that. So if you take, as you said, it's the perspective is that it's a low wage salary. If you comparatively look at it, actually it is. But when we look at the digital transformation of an organization, what we are looking at is the digital literacy. As you also mentioned, if you don't look at the digital literacy, there's no point in bringing technology if people don't know really how to adapt to it. You can have sufficient amount of dashboards. If people are not making decisions on that, the technology investment is out. But to your point, you're absolutely correct. As you go up the point, the cost of employee people will be higher. but then the throughput could also come in. Now, there's always a challenge, can AI come and replace people? Yeah, it will. I mean, that's a fact. But have you ever thought that how it could empower people on a day in a life? That's one way of looking at it. I admit it's going to completely take off certain mundane jobs, right? And with someone outside, I was discussing about the future of BPOs, right? Business process outsourcing functions. But to your point, technology will come in to reduce the cost overlay. And if we don't do that, we cannot compete. If you look at the likes of China, they're infusing AI and automation to a scale that is unprecedented. That's reality. But for us, for the foreseeable future, it's going to be a human-centric industry. Yep. And what we see is we call our operators, they're fun drivers, because all what we do, I mean, we can talk about technology and all of that, but as we say, the heartbeat of manufacturing is also still people, at least for apparel manufacturing. Of course, the sobots are coming in. There's a lot of automation in terms of IR 5.0 coming in, but yes, technology will come in to basically offset it, but at the end of the day, you'll have to strike that right balance, and that's where we see it. I don't think that's a right exact algorithm for it right now to see what combination do we need to have. But we've also seen, as much as we enable our operators with digital skills, we've seen people sometimes going out of apparel, which is a good thing at the end of the day because their quality of life is going well. A person might just go and even understand typesetting and go and, I mean, in the Sri Lankan context, you can put up a communication and provide that service on his or her village, for example, right? And then we've seen that. So for us, digital literacy training is not just focused on the line of business applications, but we look at it on a broader front to enable how do you choose a phone? How do you create your own email, for example? How do you use Google or whatever front to do some information search? How do you get your siblings to get on e-learning? So we're looking at a much more broader level, and I hope that answers the question. But you need to strike that right balance.
Sure. Thanks. Any other questions?
Yeah. Hi, my name is Pravina, and I run a software development company, and I get to work with various industries. So my question is to Dr. Anojan. You talked about the challenges when it comes to technology adoption, right? So in your industry, what kind of challenges you faced and what kind of strategies you implemented to overcome this from a product perspective? I think you mentioned the CapEx challenge, but from a product perspective, what kind of, it could be UX improvements or any functionality wise, what kind of strategies you followed?
Okay,
Thank
good
you.
question. I think, of course, basically the UI UX is very basic in terms of, because the people who are going to use it are the collectors, the farmers, stuff like that. But I think if I were to just share you one tip on this, is basically one thing which actually made, I mean, as I spoke earlier, giving or developing a technology and deploying it is very easy. Making sure they use it is the biggest challenge. I think we have worked with quite a lot of UI UX engineers, I mean, in Sri Lanka and in India, and finally we managed to really crack down this from a Italian UI UX expert who is based down in Dubai, where he actually brought in this concept of gamification. And when that creates this dopamine effect on you. And when I actually was trying to tell this to a very close friend of mine, he just told me that this, actually before we implemented it, this should definitely work. And he told me an example. I think it might remember, I mean, you might want to know what it is that his wife used to have, I mean, they live in an apartment in Colombo. His wife used to have a few flower pots outside in their balcony where she doesn't water, and it gets like every weekend or once a month they go by, come and keep these beautiful flower pots, and it dies. But I think there used to be a game, he said, which I am not, Barn Buddy, where it gives some tokenizing things where you carve something, you need to kind of replant, So she keeps an alarm because it requires about 4 hours, 6 hours, etc., etc. So she keeps the alarm to wake up and to do that harvesting. Then she gets points, and that point is shared with other friends of hers who is in that. So this is the way of that gamification, and I nailed it that I'm going to, it was quite a big investment at that time, but we really thought, let's go for it. And I think that's where the traction comes, because getting someone, deploying someone and asking someone to use is actually, we have a lot of data, we sit on a lot of data, but I think how are we going to make them use it? That's the challenge. I think, so gamification is one of that. And also maybe the ratings and stuff like that, which I think you probably see in many of these. So one thing that has been shown quite success from without we focusing, sorry about it, but for not focusing on active promotional marketing on the platform, how we were able to reach about 2.2 million users, active users right now, is because of this traction, gamification. So before that, we tried a lot of things. I think it didn't really make much sense, because how are we going to create that dopamine effect on the people and making sure that they chase behind the product rather than the product chases them. So I think a few tweaks, having a good UI, UX, those are very fundamental, but I think at a very high level, the gamification might be a good thing.
Thanks, Anojan. Any further questions? No? If not, I think as the last question, and a very useful one for the government, I think this whole agenda around, how do we drive technology within each of these strategic industries, I think is critical, but I don't think we have really cracked it. I don't think anyone has cracked it. So from your perspective, what would you expect, or I guess ask the government to do in terms of driving technology in each of those industries? Hishan, you want to go first?
Yeah, from an industry perspective, tourism, I think getting the country branding is the #1 priority for us, and I think technology plays a big role. We have to approach it from a very new technology point of view, digital marketing point of view. So that's #1. But from a user experience, from a traveler who is coming to the country, one of the first experience you get is at the airport. And that's where we have, I think, a low-hanging fruit in terms of fixing and getting that experience right. Digitizing that experience. If you go to Singapore, Dubai, you don't have a person, you just scan your passport and walk through. Yeah. I think we have that ability to do it. That will really fast-track that experience. You don't want to be stuck after an 8-hour flight, another 2 hours at the queue. So that's one priority. Digital wallets will also help. I think India, if you look at India, UPI, PhonePe, Paytm, Google Pay is the norm. So we need to get on that bandwagon. I know we have few of it here. Sure. HNB included, but we need to
lot more to do. Yeah.
broaden the spectrum to attract that spending. And finally, I think from a industry overall perspective, I feel the government can play a big role in terms of data around tourism and how you drive policy making around it. We know we talk about only arrival numbers, but nothing beyond it.
Right.
A lot of the other good tourist destination has much more data. If you go to Maldives, every property's occupancies are recorded.
Right.
Nationalities, so we have long way to go around what their consumption patterns are, where are they going, what destination. And another low-hanging fruit is also the experience for our travelers in our public spaces, which can be digitized. Like booking a train ticket, we have to wait 1 month before the date to travel. You can't book in advance. You have transport to your Yala experience, so Sigiri experience, all that can be digitized and made it more kind of user-friendly. So those are low-hanging things I think we can do, but from a holistic point of view, getting the marketing right, getting the data right, will drive better performance.
Sure, excellent, thank you. Harsha.
Yeah, I think for let's say to bring electronics into Sri Lanka, I think I think it also ties into kind of marketing your country. Like I mentioned earlier, like what are the advantages that Sri Lanka has that, say, for example, Vietnam or China doesn't have. So we have to market what is unique to us. And it would kind of sound tangential, but like tourism is also kind of ties into this. Like when companies go and figure out which sites they want to build plants, they also want to have like a good perception of the country, right? Like they want to make sure that people who are visiting the country has a place to like relax and have, because whenever we go to Vietnam and China for all these engineering evaluations, on the weekends we always go somewhere. Like we pick places and we go do some touristy stuff. So I think that is more on the marketing side, but I think as a government, I think tax concessions are needed, obviously. You cannot have tariffs kind of drive the income. So if you want to bring manufacturing and then export that out, you cannot have tariffs. So you need to have the tax concessions and also obviously subsidies in providing land. And with digitization, I think there will be a capex investment that's required. So government can also help on that front as well. But overall, yeah, I think tax is like the biggest issue that I see within Sri Lanka that could prevent us from getting the bigger brands. So I think that's one of the things that we have to address.
Great. Oshada?
Yeah, I think, Chandima, the main thing for us, I think, not just for the apparel industry, but all of the industries and the service sector as a whole, I think we are at the cusp of something very exciting as a country in terms of leveraging on digitalization. Yeah. I think what the challenge right now today is basically the critical mass we have in terms of the IT workforce. Now, we, which are the non-tech companies, are competing with also the IT industry, which is very important source of income for the country. Then we are also grappling with the situation of the exodus of people going out for very many different reasons. So I think we'd have to focus more on getting that knowledge base and the workforce really up there. Yeah. There has to be a lot more career guidance, I think, in terms of attracting more people to technology. Yeah. But also, I think, alongside that, we'll have to also focus on the curriculum. I mean, not just the universities, but the schools. Yeah. Because what I say is the digital literacy, again, I'm not talking about computer literacy, but I'm talking about digital literacy. Yeah. I think the curriculum has to come up to speed than ever before because there's so much of technological changes. And I say, I'm giving an example. I have a 14-year-old at home, and I was just teaching him ICT, and when you see the textbooks, certain questions are so archaic, right? And there's this very interesting question that was there. Asking, okay, you need to transfer about 900 GB of files, right? What medium would you use, right? The 4 answers was a CD-ROM, a DVD-ROM, an external drive, an internal drive. You know what he answers? An external drive, because he's seen the SanDisk connecting to my phone, iPhone, and we download things, right? And I had to go convince him the thought pattern on that example and say, hey, I think you have to click DVD-ROM because it has 4.7 GBs of it, and the CD-ROM won't work because it had about 700 MB. But these kids haven't seen a CD or a DVD, right? So I'm just giving a blunt example. So I think we need to go into the foundational elements, and those are quick wins we can do. Get the curriculum updated, and ensure that we have more good output of IT expertise coming in, because there's a lot more demand that's going to be created by the non-tech companies as well, because this has to be sustained locally as well. Sure. And unfortunately today we have to go even outside of Sri Lanka to set up teams, for example, in India, because one thing is the business continuity, but the other thing is that you really don't have the resources that you have, and even if you do, we can't compete at that scale of the cost that has to come in. So those are the things. I think if we can get that right, it can have a force multiplier in terms of where we want to get.
Sure. Yes, madam.
You know, I'm doing all this country branding stuff.
Yes.
I think budgets for something like that we really need to really think through, because scaling the story of Sri Lanka can't be done for $5 million, right? So we need to figure out how we do that whole piece.
So what's the ratio you want between the industry pooling and government?
I think it has to be a collective effort.
Yeah,
for
what's the
sure.
ratio?
I'm sure the government is not going to give me any money, so it will probably be an 80-20 rule.
That's good. Okay, 20%. Okay.
No, but the reality is, I mean, I was doing a TOR recently, and all I could do was tell them, let's just revamp the website. The reality is, if you are going to play in those markets, you need to really think through that piece. You can't just wake up one day and say, okay, we need to now market technology, we need to market tourism. Like I said, it has to come together. There has to be some sort of synergy there. That's one, I think, all of this AI coming into play, we really need some proper policy around it. Otherwise, you are going to have a lot more damage done than good. All these systems, all these platforms, I think a lot of education is needed, mindset change, because you've got one part of the population raring to go, you've got another part of the population who are going to actually be a problem because they don't understand the tech. They don't even know to figure out what we are doing with it. So I think a lot of education is needed outside of schooling system, just general education on the benefits of things. So while we are looking outward, I think inwardly also we need to do a lot more in terms of being out there, in terms of exploring these technologies, why we have to talk about ourselves the way we do. So I think there's a lot. I mean, it translates down into what you were saying. Someone has to feel safe when they come here, right? Someone has to see that they can go from point A to point B without hassle.
Sure.
But all of that is mindset. I think we need to look at that piece as well. So, yeah, a lot of work ahead.
Okay, lot to do. Okay, thank you. Anojan?
Okay. As my role as a secretary for Sri Lanka Agripreneurs Forum, I have been like quite deep on this vertical. But if I were to just pick one or two of those which are very critical, I think particularly to the agriculture sector, the farmer needs to change the mindset from a subsidy and subsistence-based farmer to a market-driven farmer. And one thing the government actually spoils, or I think all the governments in the past has been spoiling, is by giving free fertilizers and subsidies to the farmer. And I know there are quite a number of farmers, even when their children are, get an employment, where when it's being paid EPF, ETF, they particularly say they don't want that EPF, ETF because they might lose their aswasuma or maybe whatever the subsidy that not apart from the fertilizer subsidy, their usual subsidy that they get from the government, which is about 15,000, 16,000 bucks. So I think this is something which is very critical. And also stepping on to the next critical thing is that Sri Lankan agriculture is not really attracting quality youth into agriculture, because when you see people who get into agriculture are the people who are left out on all the verticals and who can't do anything, come into agriculture just for the survival. So that's not the quality of future generation that we need to get into a sector which, you might not visit a doctor or an engineer, or even you might not visit store on various places for your day-to-day stuff, but you will definitely use agricultural produce for at least 2 or 3 times of your meal if you're a human. So this is something which might be the last provision or the sector which might go bankrupt or will cease to operate as long as the mankind is going to survive. So I think these are just 2 things that attracting quality youth, as well as on cutting some of these. It might be a hard call to any government, but I think cutting that would help getting quality input into this.
Great. I think that's great suggestions. Yeah, so let's bring this to a closure. I think on the talent part, Oshada, I think how we are thinking about is talent creation is within our control. Demand is not, right? So I think in the past we have tried to balance these two. I think we are going to stop doing that, and we're just going to have a plan around how we push capacity on the talent. I'm sure they'll figure out what to do with that talent and skill. I think we also want to activate the vocational tier. I think there's about 40,000 people there, but we don't see them entering the industry. Again, for the reason of curriculum. Similar questions are there?
See, the beauty is, I think, the Startup Genome Report, if I remember from last year, the GSER, we are in the top 10 for basically the most innovative and entrepreneurial talent. One point was also the low cost, as you mentioned as well, affordable talent. But of course, the more important piece was that the entrepreneurial skills that it has noted as well as, and it's an independent report. So if you can force multiply this opportunity, I think that will be great.
Yeah. So definitely we want to kind of work on that vocational tier, stop building kind of curriculums in Sri Lanka. Let's subscribe to international programs, have train the trainer programs here, and really activate that 40,000, because I think we need about 300,000 by 2030, and the build up to that to sustain both the kind of the tech industry, which we want it to be a $5 billion industry, and to support all the other industries and the government digitalization as well. Yeah, so thanks everyone for joining, the panelists and the audience, and for the questions.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you.